So at Austin, I think we obviously saw that the FIA has built a flawed game for the drivers to play in. And it's caused a lot of anger on social media. And if you're listening to this right now, maybe it's because you're angry as well
Yeah.
at what went on.
Or
And
maybe you belong to the side that since this time Max Verstappen is favored, you want to follow the rules.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
and and look, we'll get into this, but I think we do as well, as we constantly talk about, do agree that in fairness, Max is just playing a broken game here, so it's not really on Max. But we'll get into the details of that. So, do you want to kick off? What did you think about it? Because there was a few incidents, but I guess the Max and Lando one
Yeah.
is what we'll focus
Yeah.
on.
I think the main thing, the main shocker for me was a very simple a simple revelation that probably I think a lot of people had after the race yesterday. A lot of people realized what an apex is, and I think they've still not realized what an apex is. They're still just going with snapshots of images and trying to prove a point when there is actually not a point.
I'm am I correct in saying as well the apex is actually just decided by the drivers as well, because you would have to put like a different apex line
Fucking
on every
precisely.
corner,
Fucking
right?
precisely.
Yeah,
That's why I actually wrote a
because
lot
where
of
I
people
think
are
the apex
talking
is and
about
where you
apex.
sorry, yeah, where
Yeah.
I think the apex is and where you think the apex is could be off by, it would be a small amount, but it could be enough that in a car that's going that quickly could make a huge difference if you think
It's
the
not a
apex
fixed
is
point.
here. Exactly, yeah.
It's not a fixed point. That's the whole.
Yes.
That's the whole thing. And anyways, I think the main thing that probably I'm not the only one who's infuriated by how the whole thing is handled. I think there are a lot of people that are in the same boat. I think the reasons are probably different. Every Anyways, the fan discourse, I'll get to that a bit later. Let's get to the main gist of it, where what we've realized is, and I think off the record when we were talking about it a bit before the pod started,
Yeah.
ended up riling us even more.
We just
I,
decided
I,
let's start the podcast because
yeah,
we're both so annoyed.
yeah. So I think what we've come to realize is, just to dumb it down a bit more, if you have a driver who is defending and he's on the inside, he basically has the freedom to push the attacking driver off the track with himself. Yeah, go for
Just
it.
one point on that. The inside doesn't matter because we had two incidents that showed us it could be inside or outside. But anyway, sorry, continue.
In terms of the driver who's defending, if a driver is defending and he's on the inside, then all he has to make sure is he's ahead at the apex. And now what it means by the apex is your braking point when you're turning. That's it. That on a very very basic term, a very very basic point of it. That's your apex, and that could vary from driver to driver again depending on where they brake and where they actually make the turn. Keeping that aside, that's the whole thing right now. That it The nuance is dead. They've taken a very small snapshot of an image and used that to ultimately make a judgment. That's your regulation right now. And that's a fucking cheat code.
Yep. My problem with it is what they've created is something that is just so easy to manipulate, right? And it's obvious that Max, we've seen Max do this a few times now, where obviously Max, like Alonso in the past, and like many clever drivers in the past, and Michael Schumacher, when the FIA has rules like this and implementations like this, it's not like, that's the very clear thing. It's like Max just did exactly what he should do in that situation, which is taking advantage of a broken system. So
Precisely.
the problem we have here is, so I'll just, for people who haven't, like, people who aren't F1 nerds like us, let me just read two snippets here from the FIA, and this will give you a point, like a pinpoint as to what the key problem is. So on the George Russell and Bottas penalty, which was earlier on, the ruling was essentially the driving standards guideline provides that when overtaking on the inside, so this is the difference in that case, he's overtaking on the inside, the driver must not force the other car off track and must leave fair and acceptable width for the car being overtaken, and this didn't occur. So George got the penalty in that situation. However, on the Norris one, they actually noted why Norris didn't get a 10-second penalty for track limits, and that was because having committed to the overtake on the outside, the driver of car 4 had little alternative other than to leave the track because of the proximity of car 1, which had also left the track. Essentially, Max didn't leave any room, and in fact Max didn't even stay on the track to give room for Lando to go around the outside. So in neither case were the driver, like in both cases, Max and George didn't leave room. So in that case, even if you say, right, we're not penalising Lando, by definition, if you were applying rules fairly here, you would say Max should get a 5-second penalty as well for forcing the other driver off the track. However, because it specifically states the overtaking car, essentially what the FIA have ruled is, if you are the defending car, regardless of whether it's inside or outside line, because Bottas was defending on the outside, all you have to do is essentially make sure that wherever they brake, you just brake later. So you just don't lift off, essentially. You just keep going, because the old thing that we all understood, or at least I understood, which was being in control of the car, now just essentially means don't lock up and kick a load of smoke up. Because for me, I would say...
Not even that. You're basically... Again, it all
because
comes...
before you do it, can I just put it simply? For me, it's if Max doesn't make the corner, if Max goes off track, for me that's definition of, well, you weren't in control then because you couldn't make the corner. Like that for me is simple, but it seems like their definition is if you don't lock up, you're kind of in control.
Their definition is you're ahead. Again, first of all, the qualifying statement is you are ahead at the apex, which is the dumbest way to actually approach this thing, because you are incentivizing the driver on the defending driver on the inside to basically brake later and go off track. That's what you're doing.
Yep.
It's as simple as that, because again, he can go off track, he can push the other car off track as well. There's no punishment, nothing.
Exactly.
It should not be that.
No, and you know what? If you're a Max fan which I saw a lot of, I argued with a lot of yesterday, and I was trying to make the point that, look, forget about who...
I've lost around, I think I lost a ton of followers. I actually opened up my account today, I lost a few, and what happened? And then I realized, okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I argued with quite a few yesterday, but to be fair, I was arguing with a couple of my followers and Dr. Obbs, and all of the people I was arguing with are actual reasonable people. So we were having more of a debate. So it was nice, kind of a nice kind of drawn out thing.
You had the patience to actually argue. I slept. I mean,
well, they were giving
3:30 a.m.
They were giving me good points back, but what I realized was the argument that they kind of had was essentially, in a lot of cases, people I was arguing with, it was essentially like Max did nothing wrong. And I'm like, that's not what I'm trying to argue. Yeah. And then as soon as we had the actual conversation, it's like, yeah, I can see where, you could see like, okay, right. This is what I'll say. If you're a Max fan and you think, well, he overtook off track, it's as simple as that. That's fun. Look, I get why you would feel that way because it benefited Max. But can I just put it this way to you? If at the rest of the tracks, where we kind of expect the McLaren to do better than it did this weekend, we'll get into that, I'm sure. But let's just say for the rest of the season now, Norris has it in his head after this weekend, and McLaren bash it into his head. Just don't brake early, right? So if for the rest of the season now, Norris qualifies ahead of Max, and every time Max goes to overtake, Norris simply just keeps his foot in, and Max has to go off track, or, gets forced off track or goes off track coming around the outside. And basically, Norris makes it impossible for him to pass. I'll ask you then, would you be okay with that? Because I think as a Max fan, you'd have to say no. That's all he has to do.
That's not even the point, right? I mean,
I'm just saying to people who are Norris
fans. I'll be honest. I've reached a point where I can't cater to a fan base because, honestly, there's a lot of this nonsense where they reach a conclusion and then they basically reverse engineer the logic out of it.
Yes.
And that's bad faith F1 discourse, and I'm not interested in it. Just not. Enough of this. I saw a lot of it today. And after a point, I just started muting. Mute. Man. I can't fuck with that. I'll come to more on the sporting part of it, where look, this is basically not this is not racing. This is not racing. That's the whole point of it. It's not finding a gray area in an engineering or a technical regulation. It's not that. It's basically allowing or incentivizing incorrect way of driving.
Yep.
Punting off other cars and maybe using that as a metric it should not be in Formula One. And if there is something wrong, let's identify it and let's get it corrected. It's not about, look, for me, the biggest why I'm pissed off is we've had 2021 where after every fucking race there was some issue, and it was entirely down to F1 and the FIA being utter rubbish when it comes to management of the entire thing. It's 3 years now. They've had 3 years, and the only thing they've done is they brought Ben Sulayem, whose priorities are if Lewis Hamilton is wearing a jewelry or if Max Verstappen is abusing or not. That is it. That is his fucking priority right now. And what have we done other than kicking off Michael Massey, who was basically scapegoat, installing Ben Sulayem, who has, I don't know what he's done in terms of race management, consistency, and logical process in place. We don't even have that. Tomorrow, if we are in for a championship battle, I think it's going to be the same nonsense. You'll have people divided on both sides. Why? Because first of all, there's no consistency in that fucking race. Throughout that race, we had, I think, 3 or 4 cases of 5-second penalties this way or that way, and even there was no consistency.
No.
2025 is coming. We have a title battle. If this nonsense continues, every fucking race it's going to be the same shit. Yeah. I'm not a fan of it. It kills.
It killed a really good. It killed what was an incredible racing spectacle up to that point. Yeah. Because essentially it just, like, I don't know. It just, for me, it was like, it kind of felt bitter then, because it was like, okay, Lando overtook. McLaren probably should have just given the place back, but in reality, under fair rules, they shouldn't have had to, because it didn't make any sense. Max went off track as well. So instead of going, wow, this was an incredible battle, I'm sitting there now and going, oh, well, these rules make no sense. It just means that you can't overtake anymore. There's just literally no way unless your car is so fast that you can completely pass them in the DRS zone, you can't overtake anymore. You can't race anymore. And for me, that's dull.
I mean,
now,
you
because
can, but the thing is, something like this still exists. It should not exist.
You can't. We don't though, unless you pass in the DRS. Like, there's no way to overtake.
In the third, here in Austin, maybe in the third sector, you could have through the whole area.
But my point is, if you're lined up and your cars are similarly paced, right? And the driver in front of you is Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Alonso, for example. And I would say probably going forward Norris, because I'm sure he will learn from this, because he tends to, as much as people bash him, tends to learn from situations.
I have a few thoughts on that as well.
Maybe some doubts get to that. As well.
Yeah.
But my point is, anyone who cops onto these rules now will essentially be unraceable, because if you can't pass them in the DRS, all they're going to do is just go, right, he's flinging it around the outside, I'll just keep the pedal in, and as soon as I'm ahead of him at the apex, I can now turn in. Like, even in that corner, if you watch Max's onboard, Max knows exactly the game he's playing, because the moment he was ahead at the apex, he actually stopped steering. He just purposely took Norris wide. And the FIA, as I read in the document, even said that. They were like, car one didn't give him any space. And earlier on, they gave a penalty.
I slept pissed off. I was pissed off, and it was 3:30, and look, everyone has slept around me, and I'm literally punching the walls at that stage, because it was so infuriating.
Yeah.
And one of the dumbest arguments I've seen people make is, these are the laws. Change the laws.
Yeah.
They're wrong. They're fucking wrong. This is not how racing is done. And I don't know how many times I can just... I have a very simple solution to all of this. Just put a fucking gravel. Just put gravel out there. Just grow some grass. Just do any fucking thing. Don't leave that place. Why do we have such a large runoff? We basically have a track. Other than the white lines, there's also a track that's there. Does it make any sense? Why do we have something like this in place? And we have the same nonsense. We had the same nonsense in Austria as well, when Max basically just I think the lap before they crashed, he did the same thing, right?
He did the exact same, and he went off the circuit and came back on ahead of Norris. But because he was the defending car, he doesn't get a penalty for it.
I don't even remember. I think they crashed lap later.
Lando basically threw it up the inside, right? Up the inside. So he went up, and what happened was basically Max just kept his foot in, right?
Basically, Max was once again he was ahead at the apex, right?
Yes. So Max just kept his foot in, which meant he was ahead at the apex, but he didn't even try and make the corner. He just kept his foot in, went way off the track, came back. So it's like he's ahead at the apex, but then it's like, yeah, sure, it's easy to be ahead at the apex when you're not trying to make the corner. You know, like, it just doesn't make any
that's the whole
fundamental sense. This is the problem I have. Is it just like, if you're watching this and you are a Max Verstappen fan, right, and you're not annoyed by this, please just think about it in a clever and logical way, which is,
leave the driver out of it.
Exactly. But even worse than that, imagine this was Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, and Max Verstappen was in Norris's position and Lewis Hamilton was the one defending. How pissed off would you be if this was okay and Lewis didn't get penalised and Max did?
They'll be shouting British bias,
everybody
on the rooftops. And the thing is, 100%. Honestly, even though it won't be British bias, but their anger will be justified.
Yeah,
it will be justified
100%.
Because it's a stupid rule. Change the rule. The whole point is change these rules of engagements when they are this rubbish. It should not be this way.
Dr. Obbs said to me yesterday when we were talking about this, and Dr. Obbs, I will point out, is a reasonable, very good guy with opinions on this stuff. I really like his opinion. So he's not some Max fanboy that's just going off. But one of the things that he actually said, which I think is an opinion of a lot of people that I don't agree with, was, because I said, well, this just means that the defending car always has a major advantage.
Rules, right?
No. What he said was, surely the defending car should have that advantage because they have track position. And for me, it's like, no, like, that's just basically what you're saying is, we're not racing then. It's just, it's all about qualifying. Because if you're ahead, you just keep it ahead by just keeping your foot in. So basically no overtaking can happen unless you have a much faster car. And I feel like we're going to have more and more of these issues because the cars are now closer. And like I keep saying, the thing people don't seem to realize is, if the game is broken, it will just advantage people like, Max fans might enjoy this, but it will advantage people like Max, Lewis, Alonso.
Yep. Exactly. It's going to fuck you up, and it's going to be at your detriment at some point or the other.
It will be thrown back in your face. Yeah.
Precisely. Look, 2021, there could not be a more perfect example of it blowing up in your face.
Yep.
Throughout that season, Max got screwed by the FIA stewards again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
In the last race, again, by the way, Lewis Hamilton fans at that time, I was there, they praised the whole thing. These are the rules, this is that, there's no bias, whatever. Last race, it all turned on its head. You play a broken game, you get fucked up.
Yep.
And they paid for it. And if it happens now, and if it happens against Max, just imagine the outrage.
Let's just say we go to Mexico this weekend, right? Norris can easily, they're coming down turn one. The DRS difference probably won't be huge between them, okay? So they're both flying down, they get to turn one, and Norris sees Max go to swing it around the outside. Norris just keeps his foot in, Max goes off and gets beached in the grass, DNFs, Norris wins the race. Will you be happy if you're a Max fan? Will you be happy if you're a Max fan then and go, well, I mean, Norris shouldn't get a penalty because he's the defending driver, so he's allowed to not control the corner. He was ahead at the apex, so he can do what he wants. In that situation, are you going to be like, yeah, brilliant decision? I don't think so. And to be honest, neither will I. I'll be like, this is stupid. We've just ruined a race now. Max has got a DNF based on some silly rule that should have been removed. But what will happen, I guarantee you, is in that situation when he DNFs, I guarantee you somehow Norris will get a penalty, because what's happening here is the rules are just the rules whenever it's just, this is the easiest decision. That's what it feels like to me. There's no consistency. It's just like, okay, what's the easiest decision here? Let's just do that. That makes sense. We're getting hassle
it's
from
going
the
to
teams.
come back. It's going to come back and bite them in the ass. The problem is whenever, and look, the same nonsense happened when Lewis was, again, I always go back to 2019 F1 Canadian Grand Prix and 2016 F1 Monaco Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Same thing. Lewis did the same thing in Monaco 2016, which Vettel did in 2019. Vettel got a penalty, Lewis didn't. And that's the same nonsense. The thing is, it all comes back and catches up with you. You want a sport that makes it... Look, if your entire focus is, my driver should win, first of all, it's not going to happen forever. No. Secondly, if that's your entire motive, go ahead, do what you want to. But don't come back and at least accuse me of all people of being a Lewis Hamilton fan, because apparently I got branded as a Lewis Hamilton fan who never said anything when Lewis benefited from it. I'm like, do you actually know me? But anyways.
It's going to be hilarious. I just know for a fact that this weekend, I just know for a fact that this is because I don't think the Red Bull, for example, will be the fastest car this weekend, and we'll talk about that later in the season or later in the session. I think it will, even if it is the fastest, I think it's going to be very, very close, which means that we could get a situation where either the Ferrari, the McLaren, or the Mercedes is ahead, right? And if you don't think Lando Norris will be the type to pick up on this little loophole, you know who will if he's ahead? George Russell, very quickly, because he's very good at playing these games.
By the way, Lewis
Hamilton
Charles
as well.
Leclerc.
Yep,
Carlos
there's plenty
Sainz.
of them. Yep, even Piastri is good at that sort of thing already.
They're not dumb.
No,
let's just...
If Carlos Sainz and George Russell, those two, I can guarantee you, out of everyone you've listed there, those are the two I can guarantee you who will absolutely take advantage of that. And I just know it's going to be a situation where Max, for example, is going to try and pass Sainz, going into a corner, and Sainz is going to go, I'll just keep my foot in, push him off track.
Yeah.
And if Max DNFs and all of the people that I was arguing with who told me, no, those are just the rules, start complaining, I will crack open a beer and start pissing myself laughing, because the answer will just be, I fucking told you last week.
Told you so.
The rules don't make sense.
Exactly. And just finally to clarify, we love the sport more than any particular driver.
Yeah.
And the sport is broken right now. This was utter nonsense. It should not be there. And that's again, just to clarify one thing. Okay, first of all, by the way, the teams are the guilty party as well. They signed off on this. And this just shows the lack of seriousness from the custodians of the sport. They have zero fucking clue. They don't want to make the sport better. It's all about raking in the bottom line. And look, if that is how you want to go about it, I think the first person who should actually be, right now, the finger should be pointed at is Toto Wolff. He was probably the most affected guilty party after AD 2021. What the fuck has he done? Why out of all those 10 people, he should have been the most thorough. He wasn't. Why?
I've said this again and again,
Pathetic,
and we've talked about this. We've talked about this again and again. The idea to just fire Michael Massey was the most short-sighted thing in the world, because it's like, right, we fired Michael Massey, that's it, now we're done. And it's like, whoa. He was only in that situation because the rules and the applications are broken. So
pathetic, yeah.
Surely you should fix and even the rule that allowed him to cause that safety car issue is still there. So it's like you fired Michael and left the rule in place. So like you're right. It's a complete and utter, just as you said, it's like, right, this, I don't care about the actual sport. I care about the money until next week, like I say, when Horner comes out and goes, this is ridiculous. Sainz punted him off track and he beached and he could lose a championship because of this. And it's like, well, Christian, why weren't you talking about this last week? Like,
exactly.
So it's just such, it's such short-sightedness.
It's just a particular thing. If it ultimately works for me, great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's not going to be how Look, at some
And
point you have
I'd
to
like to-
realize one thing. Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I'd like to point out as well, I think this massively proves one thing I have, and actually I texted to a Max fan yesterday, so I'm just going to say exactly what I said, because
I'm guessing who it.
he's a really nice guy and I really like it, but he said to me, I guess I'm wrong, like the FIA, or he's like, the FIA didn't go against Max, I thought they would here, kind of roughly that idea. And I said, yeah, well, as I've said a million times, the FIA aren't biased, they're just fucking useless. This is the thing that I need. It's not that the FIA have British bias, because the FIA, first of all, are French, and the French fucking hate the British. Can we just point that out? The FIA aren't biased; they're just useless, and the
Media
teams
is biased,
aren't
by the way.
helping.
Media, I mean,
yes.
I've shouted like anything. Media
Aren't you
is
part of the
biased.
media? Anyway.
I'm not British.
You used to be.
Fuck off.
Well, not in your
Never-
lifetime, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, that was
Sorry,
a chain of
not through
thought.
you. The
Sorry
media
about
is
that.
biased. You're saying.
Yeah. Anyways, again, just to sum it all up, the whole thing could be solved if we actually just put the gravel. I look, Austin, in terms of being raceable, is an amazing track, but god damn, those runoffs are just too huge, man.
Yeah.
They've become a joke. They've honestly become a joke. Those two areas, T1 and T12, just put a bunch of rocks and whatever it is, just cover it with that. You will not see. This thing will not happen. As simple as
And
that. It won't happen.
they can do it temporarily as well if the argument is MotoGP.
Yeah.
I mean,
They did it in Austria, right? This season
they put the strips of gravel.
Yeah, just do
Even
it.
that would be enough to stop this from happening, because like if you had that strip of gravel there, Max would have been running on that as he went on the outside, so he could have easily spun the car, or anything could have happened in that situation.
He would not,
So he's
the thing is, they would behave themselves more if that is the case.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times I've shouted about it, but gravels are the answer. This is nonsense. These long runoffs, you're basically giving extra track, and then you're whining about the fact that drivers are using it. You give them an inch, they take a mile. It's as simple as that.
I just think it's like, for me, I just think some clear, like, just be in control at the corner as well as being ahead at the apex. If the two things had to be true, for me, that would be fine. That alone would sort out, like, it wouldn't fix every issue. Gravel would definitely be better, but it would fix most issues. Because for me, the George Russell overtake was fine. Like, George was within the corner. He jumped down the inside. Bottas could have easily just braked and switched in behind, but Bottas, knowing the rules, decided to just keep it and go off track, right? But George made the corner. It's the
Bottas did it
same
with two drivers. I think he did it with Gasly as well.
because he
Same
knows
thing.
the rules. He's not an idiot as well.
And
So
he also
you know.
knows, I mean, he's not going to keep them behind anyway. So
Yeah, so
maybe
like,
he used the
but this
5
is
second trick.
exactly the same thing. The exact same thing I said in Abu Dhabi. I hate that it's so many examples, but Abu Dhabi 2021, when remember Lewis just flew off the track and kept going and said, "Oh, he pushed me off." And my argument in that situation was also always, no, like, Max kept the corner. He made the corner, so it's fine. Like, like, he was ahead
He
of the
was on
apex. He
track.
made the corner. That's tough. Like, Lewis, you should give that position back. Like, tough.
Yeah.
But
By the way, Lewis
that-
did give it back in 2022.
he gave the
when
time
Carlos...
back in 2021, and then 2022,
Yeah.
fucking useless. But I just, it seems to me that should be it. In control at the corner should mean you make the corner. So, for example, in the Max and Lando incident, if Max had kept it on the track, like if Max literally was within track limits, I would have said, fair defending, that's fine.
Yeah.
But because Max went off the track, it's like, no, he obviously just kept his foot in. And you can even see he had no interest in making that corner. Because the moment he was ahead of the apex, he literally just stops turning his wheel. He's like, I'll just fling it wide. So it's just, for me, it leaves such an easy manipulation open. And Martin, the last thing I'll say in it is Martin Brundle, when the Bottas situation happened with Russell, as soon as Russell got that penalty, Martin Brundle went, I don't think you should have got that penalty. That's going to cause some issues later. As if there was already like a script for this is how it's going to end. And as soon as he said it, I went, yeah, he's
three
right.
of them, I think. There were 3 or 4 drivers that got the 5-second penalty yesterday.
Gasly was one, right, as well.
Gasly, Yuki, Lando, George, 4.
Yeah.
4 of them.
It just, the Lando thing to say like, oh, we're not going to give him 10 seconds, we're going to give him 5 seconds because he was forced off track.
That was fucking stupid. You are going to get you're going to start counting these track limits when a driver is being pushed off. I mean, how dumb.
But it's also like, okay, we gave a penalty earlier for forcing off track, and now we're admitting that this driver was forced off track. But instead of giving the other driver a penalty, we'll not give you as harsh a penalty. It's like, none of this makes sense.
Yeah.
It just, I mean, if you're a new fan or like a less obsessive fan than we are, how are you supposed to follow this sport? Like, how are you supposed to watch this and go, hang on, wait, but he stayed in the track, but what? But the other one got a penalty for this earlier. No, it doesn't matter because he was overtaking, you see, and in that case, it doesn't matter because of X regulation BYC on this page that no one knows about.
Apex. I mean, the word apex was the key word yesterday, and I don't think I've laughed as much at someone flaunting a word without having zero fucking clue what it meant. But that's the funniest bit for me.
Yeah.
Anyways, just to cap it all off, Toto said that there's an inherent bias. So our friend, I think Baxty was here a couple of weeks back, I think. So Baxty is hinting that it's a comment about Derek Warwick. I do not agree with that because Derek actually gave Max a penalty very recently, if I'm not wrong. I don't think it's about that, and I don't think there's any bias in favor of Max.
No.
I think Max is basically using the system to the best of the ability. That
Cleverly. Yeah.
Yeah. The system's broken. Fix it.
Yeah.
And maybe
I don't
Toto
care
needs to look at the mirror for once to actually take the blame of what this should have been on him. I think after the kind of nonsense, and I think he should actually be sat down and questioned. Did you guys not go through whatever these new rules of engagement were? And if you did, why did you not raise an alarm when something like this was written? It's
what worries me is the other day when they were having their meeting to decide, they've decided that they are going to go ahead with the simplified regulations for next year, which was supposed to come in this year, but they're still writing them. So they're going to come in.
Which one?
So last year there was a big discussion and a big decision to start writing simplified sporting regulations because the sporting regulations have gotten so bloated over the years, that we have all this kind of really complex, well, in that specific situation because it was a Sunday at noon. Yeah, like all this stuff that's just been added over the years. They're going to rewrite the sporting regulations to make them simplified for like more casual fans and viewers to understand, as well as the drivers to kind of know straight away. I initially thought, great idea, but if the simplification is going to be, just be ahead of the apex and then it doesn't matter. That for me is like, that's a bit too simple. Let's maybe be careful here.
Especially if these guys are not even going to read it, because the way Toto sounded, I don't think he has any clue of these regulations. Whatever the rules of engagement are, I doubt he even knows what's actually written in them. And
I'm genuinely surprised that they're not appealing this, to be honest. In both situations.
What can they appeal on? Which one?
I guess in both the Bottas, Russell and the Lando Norris situation, I think the problem is you need new evidence, don't you, to appeal. So there's not going to be any new evidence.
But the thing is, if the regulations says
if the rules are this,
if the rules are this, what are they going to appeal on? You have to change the rules.
Yeah,
it comes down to that.
Yeah,
and which is not going to happen soon, right? They need another.
They're not going to do it before the end of the season.
They're not going to do it until something blows up. Let's keep it that.
They're not going to do it until we get to a point where, if Lando, which we'll talk about next, I suppose, if Lando miraculously gets to like 7 points in, difference or 6 points difference by the end of the season, and the very last race at Abu Dhabi he just forces Max like into the wall and wins or something,
and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my god,
we need to change these rules, like, you know, it's just like, well, too little too late, guys. You know, you should have changed them weeks ago, months ago, years ago. Anyway,